Irina Tsukerman is a human rights lawyer and national security analyst. She graduated with degrees in international intercultural studies and Middle East studies from Fordham University in 2006 and received her GD with a focus on national security law from Fordham Law School in 2009. She's the vice president of Timberwolf Phoenix LLC, a media security and defense boutique consultancy. Currently, she also serves as an advisor to the London-based International Justice Organization and the spokesperson for Gulf Israel Human Rights Forum. She has written extensively on geopolitics, human rights, security, information warfare, and the MENA region for numerous domestic, international media and think tanks. Has appeared on various domestic and international media including Al-Ruya, Al-Arabiya, Fox Business, I-24, Morocco's Channel 2M, The John Batchelor Show, and various Azerbaijani channels. Has been quoted widely in various media, and her writing has been translated to Arabic, Farsi, Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, German, Indonesian, Kurdish, Turkish, Azerbaijani, Russian, and Chinese. She is also a regular speaker at the International Academic Conference. I want to welcome today in the this episode of The Capital, Irina Tsukerman. She's a human rights lawyer. Irina, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. I want to ask you about Aden airport bombing. I saw your Twitter account, you write about it. What do you think about who accused the UAE and who absolved al-Houthi from this attack?
Well, there are two factors here. One is a pervasive information warfare campaign against UAE and their coalition by the Houthis themselves, by Iranians and other parties. They have a very strong apparatus aimed at Western countries. In the United States, there is an active pro-Houthi lobby. Now there is a sense that the administration may designate Houthis as a terrorist organization before the end of its term. However, nevertheless, that does not stop the lobbying activities. Furthermore, other lobbies involved in anti-UAE attacks are activists, Yemeni activists who claim to be neutral and who follow the UN guidelines and UN human rights reports and contribute to those reports by claiming that both sides, the Arab coalition members and the Houthis are equally responsible for the conflict, and in that sense they actually whitewash terrorism and human rights abuses by Houthis. All of that is fueled by a number of organizations in Europe. Some of them are Iran-backed and some of them are Qatar-backed that are aimed at delegitimizing UAE, and they attack entities also that do business in UAE and file reports and so forth, and a lot of them are very one-sided, inaccurate, and but they have big networks, and that's what's behind this campaign.
Irina, what do you think the message was from this bombing, and is it a message for a Riyadh agreement that it's not welcome anymore? Is it a message for Saudi Arabia? And how is the timing? Do you see the timing of this bombing when the government is coming back to Aden?
Well, the timing took place exactly when the new unity government actually was landing in Aden to rejoin, to show its legitimacy by coming back on the ground to be with the people, to contribute to the reconstruction of the country, to assist people during trying humanitarian times with the COVID. And this attack killed and injured over 80 civilians in the area. So it was not just a political symbolic act aimed at the members of the Arab coalition or the Yemen government or delegitimizing. It was absolutely a terrorist attack against regular people as well. It was very much aimed at civilians as much as the politicians. And of course, the Houthis are not happy about the agreement. They would rather pro-Saudi and pro-UAE factions be divided and fighting among themselves than finally coming together, joining forces and understanding that the real problem here is the Houthis who are not legitimate, who have not come to power by any legitimate means, who do not represent any people in Yemen, even people under their own control, and who represent only the will of a completely foreign entity, which is Iran. So they were fulfilling Iran's message. It wasn't even their own.
Right. About the summit, the Gulf Summit in Al-Ola on 1st of January, do you think the Gulf reconciliation will happen? And what about the invitation of President Sisi? Some other voices, they ask for Erdogan to be present or to be invited. What do you think about this?
Well, I think President Sisi should absolutely be part of any summit where any sort of major decision should be even considered whether or not it happens. And I believe that the parties who asked for President Erdogan to be invited did so not of any sense of, not because this issue has anything to do with Turkey, because it doesn't at all, geopolitically speaking, but because they are not sensing, it's actually an act of an aggression. They are stating that President Sisi's involvement in this issue is an outsider and as an ally to some of the other states represented. And these parties believe that Turkey is more close to them, so bringing in the reinforcements. Now, as to whether or not it's actually going to be a reconciliation, I understand that several countries have been pushing very hard to resolve the underlying issues that caused the 2017 rift between Qatar and a number of other GCC states. But in reality, and based on my understanding, the underlying issues that are quite serious, the 13 demands or even several of the main ones have not been met. Throughout these reconciliation talks, Qatari media has been attacking its counterparts, even as they were trying to come to a diplomatic resolution, even though these media was, in fact, part of the conditions for this summit was the cessation of this information warfare and meddling in foreign affairs. And not to mention, there has been no evidence presented that Qatar has modified its approach to its work with Iran and with the Muslim Brotherhood. There has been no evidence that they stopped any of the activities that caused problems. And in fact, media recently has reported that there is apparent evidence that Qatar has been actively funding terrorist organizations such as Hezbollah and providing drones for Houthis that they used to attack Saudi Arabia. So if they are in fact considering reconciliation, they should absolutely put their own security first before any PR appearances. There's nothing to be gained from acquiescing to Qatar's demands to lift the blockade other than compromising security unless they take this seriously, and so far they haven't.
We see in the region there is U.S. military preparation to confront the possibility of any attack, Iranian attack on their troops or on their forces. How do you think things is going on there? Is there another war? Does President Trump gonna declare war on Iran very soon?
I don't believe that to be the case at all. And actually, this militarization is in direct response to recent and persistent attacks on the U.S. sites, targets such as the embassy in Iraq to mark the anniversary of Qasem Soleimani's liquidation. Fair warnings have been given to these militias. They persisted in these attacks, putting U.S. personnel in danger, and this is a defensive attack to deter further aggression rather than to start another war. The Iranian forces know fully well the price of continued aggression. They also know that they stand no chance in active direct combat with the U.S. military. So, in fact, these measures will actually minimize any potential casualties for Iranians themselves.
On the other side, Turkey has announced that President Erdogan wants an approach to Israel, but meanwhile Israel has announced that it's take slow steps until they understand what Erdogan wants in this message. So how do you think, as you are an expert in Arab-Israeli relationship, how do you think about this rapprochement that Erdogan proposed to Israel?
Well, Erdogan feels threatened by the Abraham Accords because now Israel has other trade options. Up until this point, Turkey was a very significant trade partner to Israel, and even the political tensions have not dampened the volume of trade. But Israel also had it was limited in its options in the region, with the UAE and the Bahrain coming into the picture. Its own options are diversifying. Turkey has managed to, under Erdogan, has managed to destroy its relationship with a number of its trade partners, including European states. Its own internal economic situation is very, very serious. The lira has been in free fall. Mass corruption has undermined its internal economic dynamics. It's under an informal boycott by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and a number of other countries. So it's losing financially, and now it's at the risk of losing some volume of trade from Israel due to its improved relations with some of the Arab states. So this is a pragmatic step for Erdogan. He has not, in fact, modified his political rhetoric with respect to Israel, and has continued to incite aggressive messaging from some of his base, which is why Israel is taking a very cautious approach to this situation. They're willing to listen. They're willing to consider any action that will prevent aggression and conflicts and tensions, but they also understand that he's playing a double game here.
Irina, we go back to the relationship with Iran. Do you think that there is any possibility of canceling the sanctions on Iran with the new administration, Biden administration?
I think it's highly likely. In fact, the new administration has they made a message that as a new administration, they would in fact lift the oil sanctions on Iran, which would actually empower Iran and China, which had been the hardest struck by, due to their sheer volume of trade, and the number of other countries that had previously engaged in oil trade with Iran. It would be a devastating blow to those who wish to contain Iran. It would destroy some of U.S. leverage in any negotiations or other dealings with Iran. It would be an extremely ill-advised step, but that's what the Biden team is considering.
We saw lots of divisions this year. Many divisions have been hampered by sharp partisan divisions in America. Are we facing a new America or a change in the power of America and on the global influence?
I think that no matter what happens, U.S. will continue to remain a significant factor. Whether or not it chooses to exercise its power effectively is another issue. That doesn't mean that it will not continue to have potential. It's a huge country of 330 million people, a very strong economy, and very influential in a number of fields. So disregarding it, no matter what choices it makes over the next 4 years, would be extremely unwise for anyone. No matter what course it chooses, it will have an impact. Now, whether that impact is going to be neutral in the sense that U.S. will simply not be engaged and will allow other forces to become more influential and fill the power vacuum, whether they'll be actively interventionist and possibly cause more damage, or whether they'll be intervene when needed for its own interests and the interests of its allies, but take a more thoughtful and long-term approach, remains to be seen. I would of course hope for the last, but it depends on whether the new administration chooses to be practical and learns from the mistakes of the past, or whether they will pursue an aggressive ideological approach that has not worked out well in previous administrations.
You asked on one of your tweets, you said, why is the fake news from Al Jazeera getting so much traction in echo chamber media? Because there is an agenda to attack Abraham Accords and destroying growing UAE-Israel relationship. Can you elaborate more on this matter?
Well, following the signing of the Abraham Accords, there's been an influx of Israeli tourists and potential business partners coming to Dubai, learning, engaging in both people-to-people engagements, political engagements, signing agreements, and just seeing the country. The Qatari media has put out a fake news campaign asserting that Emirati hotel owners are accusing Israelis of a massive stealing. Now, for anyone familiar with the UAE laws, the laws there concerning theft and other such petty crimes are extremely strict. So if there was a massive influx of theft, these people would have been facing very serious legal repercussions, and we'd be hearing all over the news about it from lawyers from both countries, and there'd be a massive international scandal. Nevertheless, this media has been influential in certain circles. It has been picked up by some of the friendly Arab media and disseminated in various parts of the populations, including among people who've been skeptical of these accords. And even some Jewish newspapers have picked up the story as if it was actually accurate, and it's as if the Emirati hotel owners were actually making the statements rather than quoting Qataris on this fabrication. That I think is very concerning, that there is no ability in some of the Jewish press to distinguish between allegations and facts being actually happening. So they're reporting this as news, even though it's an assertion by a hostile propaganda mouthpiece for government.
My last question, Irina, is about Saudi Arabia. It has been subject to a widespread attack in the American liberal media, including finally that Prince Mohammed bin Salman asked Trump before his departure to prevent him from any trial inside America. Could anybody believe this, or is it reasonable or believable?
As a lawyer, I'm going to address this as follows. Essentially, I don't believe that such an approach would be the best possible way to deal with these losses. First, because being granted legal immunity would make the Saudi Crown Prince appear weak, as if he is not confident in his victory in those lawsuits. Second, from the U.S. perspective, granting this sort of exception to somebody who is not a head of state would invite a clamor by various other people asking for the same treatment. Politically, it would be unwise. And third, it would not be effective because the moment President Trump leaves office, his successor could potentially lift this issue. Now, there's something in the U.S. called the Foreign Sovereign Immunity Act, which protects heads of state from being from civil lawsuits. In the event the crown prince becomes the king, all these lawsuits would automatically become null and void. And the reason he's being attacked now is there is an information warfare attempt to undermine his credibility and make him appear such a liability that he does not actually reach that status. So we have to understand that this is not about the legal process. This is an information warfare attack. And at the end of the day, this is not about legal victories. This is about defamation. This is about character assassination. That's not to say, however, that there is not a legitimate legal pathway to victory for the crown prince. And I would actually caution against pessimism on this front, against being concerned with the facts of these lawsuits to the point that the legal aspect of it is disregarded. There are many ways to pursue this very successfully. I would advocate a very aggressive approach. As for specific strategies, obviously these are not for public discussion, but most importantly, he and his team should keep in mind that this is in fact a political move. It's a move by his many adversaries who are feeling threatened by the great effect that he has had. He should see it as a sign that he is succeeding. He should see it as a fact that they are desperate to undermine him, and he should take also political steps to combat the information warfare as much as achieving legal victories in these cases.
Thank you so much, Irina Tsukerman. You are a human rights lawyer. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity.